All right, and we are live. Webinar has started. And hello and welcome everyone to our webinar on ethical marketing today. I'm excited to have you all here with us. And as a couple more people are still joining, I just want to set the tone for this webinar. I have two fantastic guests with me today, Jami and Hannah Heidegger. They are a powerhouse mom and daughter team, and they will introduce themselves shortly. And today we talk about ethical marketing. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to also share what this means for me. To me, ethical marketing is all about transparency, especially around product claims, and it means to give your consumers more information about your clinical study or perception study or about your ingredients, and also give more information about your why. And in case you don't know who I am, my name is Susanne Mitschke. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Citrus Labs. Citrus Labs is the leading contract research organization, or CRO, for consumer brands. We conduct clinical trials and perception studies for brands and work with supplements, superfoods, pet health companies, and of course also cosmetics. And the end product of a clinical study or perception study is typically a substantiated product claim. And if you're interested in conducting your own research, you can contact us at hello@citruslabs.com. And as always, some housekeeping. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box of Zoom, and we will answer your questions at the end of this webinar. And now, drum roll, please. I'm super happy to have two wonderful people here with me, Jami and Hannah Heidegger of Retrouvé. Thank you both so much for being here with us today and telling us a little bit more about your journey with Retrouvé and how you're approaching ethical marketing. And could you both quickly introduce yourselves, how you got involved in the cosmetic world, and tell us a little bit also about your company, Retrouvé?
Well, thank you so much again for having us here. It's an honor and a pleasure. And I am Jami Heidegger. I am the mom. I am the third generation in my family. I was the fourth generation owner of Kiehl's since 1851, which some of you may have heard of. That was my family company that I was raised in. My grandfather and my father before me were both predecessors there, and I got to work together with them, which was just amazing. And that was my introduction into the cosmetic industry. Basically, I was, maybe 3 years old, as far back as I can remember, being in the store and launching my education in that. And now I'm so pleased and honored to have Hannah join us as the next generation. Hannah is my younger daughter. And she has just been incredible coming in and being really interested in handling all of our global education and training. She's now also our vice president. Hannah's been working with us for a number of years. But additionally to that, of course, she grew up with my husband and myself being involved in the industry. So she was exposed to it from a very young age as well. If I may just share a little bit about my background, and then Hannah, if you want to share. With Kiehl's, we had really a pharmacological background. It was called Kiehl's Pharmacy for very many years. My grandfather was a pharmacist, as was Mr. John Kiehl, the original founder. And back in those days, pharmacy was really drugs were teas and poultices and honey and creams and things of that nature. And they had a lot of different herbs as well. And so working with that for such a long time, my grandfather started to make different ointments and creams, especially with the herbs, that he would then sell in the apothecary, the pharmacy. And this was sort of based on the old world, John Kiehl coming from Germany and my grandfather from Russia. And again, this was what was partly considered medicine at that time. And then my father came in after World War II, where he was an Air Force pilot, Air Corps pilot at the time. He opened his own drug manufacturing facility, Morse Laboratories. And our umbrella name in homage to that is actually Morse Laboratories. So he came at it from drug manufacturing and all that that entailed. And then when his factory was taken over in Hoboken, New Jersey by Eminent Domain, he went into business with his father, and he really started what we consider now, to my knowledge, modern day cosmetics. So basically bringing this aspect of drug manufacturing, the old world knowledge of ingredients and pharmacology, and putting those together into creams and things in ways that we could use for daily skincare. And that was now starting in about the late 1950s. So ever since the 60s, when I was born, I'd been working in Kiehl's together with both of them and studied toward this. And so I created eventually over 100 of the formulations that we sold at Kiehl's, some of which are still in use and amongst their best-selling products. And yes, so we sold to L'Oreal in 2000. We had a very long non-compete. And during that time, I continued to create with one of my chemists from Kiehl's, with whom I'd worked since 1983, products just for myself. So it was the ultimate vanity project. I said, I just want to create the strongest skincare that I can for my own skin to help with preventive maintenance. I was rounding the bend at 40, out in the sun a lot. My husband's a ski racer, a former world champion. My daughters were equestrian, so I was out in the sun a lot. And that was really how Retrouvé started, was just making these formulations for myself that were sometimes based on some of the products that I made at Kiehl's that I used to boost for my own use with higher concentrations of ingredients. Back in the day, we didn't have a way to keep that stable. And so over the years, we ended up coming up with this airless system, which we'll talk about more later. In order to give more stability, we have a triple airless protection system that is trademarked, and that's what we use so that we can have higher concentrations and get more clinically effective levels, and therefore clinically proven results as well. So that's really something that we emphasize in the brand. And now we are celebrating our 10th anniversary this year, and we have 10 products in 10 years. So it's a very tightly curated line. We'll speak about that a little bit more later. But I'm just so glad now to have Hannah join and really be my right hand in all of this, and learn from my husband and myself, as well as bring all that she brings from her background.
Yes, and as now the fourth generation of my family to be in the skincare industry, first of all, as my mother mentioned, I mean, it's been over 100 years that my family has been in this industry. So I'm honored to get to continue the legacy. And as our head of education and also marketing as well, I'm really excited to get to talk about ethical marketing and transparency today, because those are things that are very important to us at Retrouvé, and that we include within our own messaging as well. So we're really looking forward to sharing more about that.
And if I may say, these are things that we did pay a lot of attention to at Kiehl's as well. So they're part of our mission statement there. And we have brought those similar values. Of course, we're still the same people now to the new company that we have formed, Retrouvé.
Yeah, this is amazing.
I know that was pretty long.
I don't think we have it often, right? That we are talking, to people that really eat and breathe, skincare and cosmetics, and the whole pharmaceutical space as well. So how do you think, does your family background especially influence your approach to innovation, in particular in this space?
Shall I start?
Yes.
Well, innovation has always been something that we were doing and involved in from the days of my father first coming in with drug manufacturing, and how he changed the manufacturing processes from what was done at the time. We had our own factories at Keels, but ingredients were really our specialty. And so we were utilizing ingredients way back when that I have to laugh. Like, my father started using squalane in the early 60s. Of course, it was from an animal derivation back then. But I just was shown an article last year that said, oh, squalane is the new buzzword, you know. So a lot of the things that we started years ago, we were doing waterless formulations. We always had kind of very streamlined products and ideas. A lot of the things that are considered innovations in modern day use now, contemporaneously, are things that we really started, particularly with Retrouvé, even 10 years ago, that other people are just now coming to. Another case in point on that is the whole airless system. A lot of people do have airless packaging now in terms of the bottle, but we have a fully airless system that goes extra steps. And why is that important? It's important because it gives you longer stability, particularly for ingredients like vitamin C that are very delicate. And these ingredients are effective, but when they are exposed to light and oxygen, they oxidize. And I'm sure you've seen in products where they, you know, turn black, or a very, very dark brown, or can separate. And then you're not getting the same efficacy from the ingredients. And we can also help to give the product a shelf life with less preservative in this system. So this was one of the innovations that really enabled Retrouvé to be what it is and to be so different from other.
Absolutely. And it comes
lines.
so much, as you mentioned in your question, from our family history within drug manufacturing and pharmacology. We're really a science-backed brand. And so being able to take that history and knowledge that we've learned over generations and be able to bring that into Retrouvé with our new innovations, such as the, you know, triple airless protection system that we have. But not even just in that way. My mother was also the first to do sampling many years ago. So not even just, you know, within actually the technology within our bottles, but also just an innovator in the industry as a whole. Like we mentioned with the water-free formulations, my mother started sampling. I mean, there's so many things that we have been, you know, innovators in.
Called in the press, at least, Queen of Sampling in the 80s, because this was something that Keels had done since way back when, actually in the later 70s. And that was always really important to us, but it wasn't something that everyone was doing, just as they are now.
Yeah.
So the innovations were both within the product, as Hannah mentioned. We have our patent pending, for example, on our intensive, and we have some very advanced technology in that, but also, as she mentioned, in our marketing approach. So, for example, something that's always been very important to us, and part of the Keels mission as well as the Retrouvé mission, is giving back and supporting the community. And so we started really way back when innovating the idea of making products for particular causes. So back in the 80s, we made hand care for a cure for AMFAR, and we gave 100% of the sale price to the organization for AIDS research. This was, to my knowledge, not done before that. We did the same for the Magic Johnson Foundation with Magic's Elixir, where we gave 100% of the proceeds. We have done through the years a lot of partnerships and collaborations, such as with Project Angel Food. And now that's almost expected of companies, that they will have a charitable component. But back then it was something that, you know, people didn't really think about in the industry. So we were so proud to have been able to bring things that were our personal values and important to us, such as sustainability, supporting the environment, other actions like that, into the company. So that's a big part of Retrouvé now as well. And we think, in addition to the importance of transparency in what we're doing from as much as possible an ingredient and technological point of view, the idea of ethical marketing through sustainability, through how we run our company, those sorts of issues all are important under that umbrella that you mentioned that we're speaking about today.
That's amazing. Yeah, I feel like a lot of these, let's call it corporate social responsibility, right? That is in your DNA. I think a lot of these companies are now just doing it for the sake of doing it without really being in it because everyone is now expecting it, as you said, Jamie, right?
We
But
kind
it's
of
great
have
that
to now.
exactly. Yes, exactly. But that's great. And part of what we want to talk about today is also the informed consumer and how the consumer changed over the years.
Yes.
I think that specifically from 2020 to 2022, 2023, so basically during COVID, a lot of things have changed because everyone had more time. Everyone also understood that their health inside and outside is really important. And how are you seeing, consumers changing? And especially, do you see anything in regards to a change in buying behavior?
Well, so interesting that you bring that up, because we are thrilled to see the evolution of the educated consumer. That's been something that we always tried to do, even back in the Kiehl's days. I was one of the first, again, to my knowledge, to make a newsletter where we talked about issues in the industry and about ingredients. And we always wanted to educate people. At Retrouvé, we have a very informed and well-trained staff with our concierge service. So one can, reach them basically 24/7 in order to ask questions about ingredients. But people today are so much more savvy and informed. That's a positive thing, I think, of social media. Also, you can go and look up any ingredient, and there are apps on the phone where people can really learn about these things, and they are more interested to protect themselves, whether it's nanoplastics in the water that they drink, or how to exercise, fitness concerns for longevity, nutrition. All these things are so much more available. And I think it's kind of leveled the playing field that almost everyone, to some degree, is really interested in this to try to protect themselves. But in terms of the consumer's behavior changing, one of the biggest things in my generation, of course, is back in the day, it was basically in a store. We started the whole idea of DTC and mail order, to my knowledge, again, at Kiehl's back in the 60s. My father would bring packages and you could call in, and then we put it on computer. But now DTC is so much of a larger proportion than it ever was before. And I know you have some other thoughts on the more modern consumer.
Absolutely. Well, the consumer now, as you mentioned, is much more sophisticated, much more interested in ingredients. And I think that leads also to a rise of science-backed, wanting clinical results, wanting really to see what these products are going to be doing for their skin in terms of clinical testing, and also wanting to know what each ingredient does and how it's going to work with their skin. So I think, as my mother mentioned, it's something that we've really been a proponent of for many years, in being transparent in terms of our ingredients. It's one of the many things that sets Retrouvé apart, the ingredients that we use, the high concentrations that we use. And we are here just to help people to look and feel their best. We want whatever's going to be best for the consumer in that way. And so we're really interested in educating them as well. And so we're so pleased that we've seen this rise in a more, sophisticated consumer that's more interested in ingredients as well.
Right. We've always been talking about these things, but people weren't necessarily as interested, as Hannah mentioned, in hearing about it earlier on. And so we love to talk about it. And the more one knows about ingredients and testing, as you mentioned, earlier on when we were speaking, the more that it just helps us at Retrouvé to distinguish ourselves from a very saturated marketplace. And understanding about concentrations, for example. People didn't realize earlier on that ingredients are listed according to the concentration. So if a company says, oh, yes, we have, so much of this, that, and the other, and you see it and it's the very last ingredient, it's probably not at that high of a concentration. And by the way, in order to make a claim on an ingredient, one has to use the clinically effective level to make that claim, right? So I think consumers are starting to understand that as well, that from nothing comes nothing. So if you don't have a certain concentration, then probably you're not going to get the promised result of what that ingredient may do. So that's another important aspect. And because of our history in compounding and formulating over decades, we have ingredient selections and resources that give you a very potent effect. But for example, the vitamin C that we use, the tetrahexyldexylascorbate, it is also, by the way, a quasi-drug in Korea and Japan. We use it at a higher level, but it's buffered in oil. And it is an ingredient that, although very effective, is less irritating than most of the vitamin Cs and also more stable. So because of our knowledge, we can make these kinds of differences and even explain it to the consumer, who I think, nowadays is concerned about understanding all of these things. So we love it. For us, it's a great thing, and we continue to educate and to share the knowledge. And of course, there are discoveries coming all the time and new ingredients. And so it's our passion. We love to talk about it and share that knowledge through myself, through our social media, and through our concierge, and in our stores. Hannah goes to all the stores, before the pandemic, and trains the people that one would interface with. And we really give them a lot of information in order to help the consumer, so that the consumer can have a good arsenal to protect themselves and really understand what they need to know to find the best, most effective products for their own individual skin type and needs.
That's fantastic. And you mentioned that you're all about education, right? You have that concierge service, you have your newsletter, you have additional information on your website, you educate on social media, you educate in stores through, staff that you are training. And do you think that, all of this is also changing customer expectation, not only for Retrouvé, but for everyone in the industry, that everyone is like, all consumers are looking for, 100% transparency in terms of efficacy, safety, ingredients, where ingredients coming from. Do you think that this is like a big shift that's currently happening?
Absolutely. I think it's a huge shift that's currently happening. And I think it's resulting in companies having to change their approach, which I think is a great thing. Because customers are wanting to know more about ingredients, I think that new products that are coming out may be more conscious about the ingredients that they're using and the percentages that they're using them in. And so I think it's a wonderful thing. And it's definitely a big shift that we are seeing now. Also, the rise in, like I mentioned before, clinical testing, and really that expectation from the consumer that they have these clinical results to really back up the claims that they're making. Also, more transparency in terms of the marketing claims. So in terms of what they're actually saying, and then what they have to back it up with in terms of testing, and also in terms of where ingredients are coming from. I think the sourcing of ingredients is something that is really important as well, and to be transparent in that, and is something that the consumer is expecting. So I think that companies now are having to make a shift into being more transparent, because that is what the consumer is expecting now.
Right, and more conscious of all those issues. However, there's a little bit of a downside, which is why we know that there's more education needed that we want to share. So for example, because it becomes a marketing concept as well, you get the ideas of, clean and green and what is all clean and things like that, where there isn't really a definition in the industry. And so some people may not really realize that. So they just rely very much either on marketing claims or things that they may hear on social media or from influencers or even paid doctors who are fronting brands, and you don't know that they're actually being paid. So I know the FTC is trying to force everyone to acknowledge those things, but it still is a bit of a caveat emptor, buyer beware. And so there's more areas that we can share knowledge that will help the consumer. One of the big areas when we speak about testing is really the difference between clinical testing and user perception. And a lot of consumers, I think, still don't really understand that. Even within our own company, for example, sometimes people will say to us, well, you have 100% result on this, why don't you use that? And we say, yeah, but a 20% increase from a clinical test in, whatever the thing that we were testing for, that's huge. Like the lab will say, we've never seen something like that. But because the number is 20% and not 100%, marketing people, even within our own company or other companies, may not see that as such a thing of gravity that it really is. And it's such great validation for the product. But again, I think the idea of, the numbers, if it's not 97 or 100, but there are great results that we have that are 55% increase or even a 10% increase in quality of skin tone, et cetera, makes a really big difference. So I know, Hannah, you try to explain that too when you are.
Absolutely. Well, it's definitely something that we think is still an area that could use more transparency as well from companies when they're marketing their results that they've received in terms of clinical testing being, measured with machines and changes on the physical skin. And that's where, we see some of these other numbers like my mother was mentioning with, 55% increases in the skin. Well, if you're actually seeing a 55% increase in a physical change on the skin, that's a really high number. But it may not seem the same as 100%, but those are two different types of tests, both very valuable, both great tests, both giving you wonderful information about the product, one being how people perceive the product and one being, testing the physical changes on the skin. But both are great. And just an understanding of these are two different types of tests and these are different things that you can see with this product. So that's definitely an area that we are trying to educate in as well. Because we think it's really important that people understand that there are different types of tests out there where you can get different information to make a more informed decision about a product.
And that's why we think that labs such as yours are so important as well. And, doing that kind of testing with an independent third party. Because I think a lot of times consumers don't realize that sometimes a product may be tested on, eight of my friends or something like that. And that's not really, you need to have a certain number of participants. And in order to have, relevant scientific data that is really considered informative, there need to be certain rules around that. So going to a lab such as yours and having those things done, you can really then proudly talk about the results. But I think a lot of times people don't necessarily understand the difference. So we always try to indicate, Citrus Labs found this, that, or the other about our product, or this was tested in this particular lab, and this is what they came up with, so that customers can appreciate that. And why doesn't everyone do it? Well, it's expensive. It takes time. It takes more effort, and you don't know what you're going to get, right? So when you just give it to people who already maybe, like the product or are biased, or maybe your family members or your best friend, it's a lot easier to get positive feedback than complete strangers that are organized through a lab.
Yeah, 100%. I really like that.
So much to say on that.
Yeah, I really like that you make the kind of, that you distinguish between consumer tests, consumer perception, right, and actual clinical trials, because there is a huge, huge difference. And as you mentioned, many people, even in the industry, don't even know the difference. And why should we then expect that consumers know the difference, right? And as you mentioned, Jami, right, if you have a 20% increase, or let's just say like 20 or 30% decrease in fine lines and wrinkles, like objectively measured by an instrument, that is huge. Yeah, it's incredible. But obviously it doesn't look that great in marketing. This is why we don't see these results often, because, oh, it's only 20%, but then, 100% of participants agree that, their fine lines and wrinkles improved. That's obviously better, right? But
right.
yeah,
So I think it's so important now for us to further explain that, which sort of forces other companies to have to do those testings if the consumer is expecting it and understands it and wants to see it. And what I love about that is that that helps to really level the playing field. Because what we have now is an industry where a lot of companies make a lot of different claims, some of which we're not even supposed to as per the FDA, right? So if you say, and arguably a lot of products, ours included, and many others out there at this point in time, I think can make obviously physiological changes on the skin. But when we make some of the claims that I see other companies making, whether we can substantiate them or not, it makes our product a drug and not a cosmetic. And also sometimes it's things that we can't be testing for or aren't allowed to be. And so as a result, people can say things and people may read it in marketing material or hear it on social media, and that will be the bar for what they expect of every company. Like it's going to remove all my wrinkles or going to give me all new stem cells or, whatever different things that we hear. And sometimes, by the way, that's not exactly what's being said, but that is what very savvy marketing knows what will be understood. For example, removes a wrinkle is different from removes the appearance of a wrinkle. It's different in a court of law, but to a consumer who isn't as sophisticated, perhaps that means the same thing. Oh, it's going to take away my wrinkles. So if you hold every company then to that bar that I don't like a cream unless it removes all my wrinkles, one is really having, unrealistic expectations and maybe will be disappointed with another product and not really understanding that there are limitations to what cosmetics can do or are allowed to do and what we are allowed to say according to the FDA. So when we can do this clinical testing, and we're only allowed to do it and make claims for non-drug claims, that really shows, that gives everybody a level playing field. It's not just what we're saying. It's not skirting the issues or saying something that is against the regulations. Myself personally, I like to follow the regulations and perhaps under promise and we hope overperform. But for a lot of companies, they can maybe deal more in hyperbole, and particularly with social media, if something goes viral, or an influencer who isn't necessarily a skincare specialist says, oh my goodness, this and that, everybody wants to try it. So we think that in order to have something that we have apple to apple comparisons, the absolute best way is through the clinical evaluations.
Yeah, and I also have to say that we are running hundreds of studies a year, and I do not see results like the ones from Retrouvé often, and I think it really speaks to the quality also of your products. Your study results, they really were phenomenal. I think that all parameters that we tested were statistically significant. And it's amazing that you leverage clinical research in everything that you do. And I think it's probably also because your products are a little bit different. It's not, it's not a lifestyle, right? But this is your identity, and it really shows. And that's amazing. And we already talked a little bit about trends, right? And how you are trend setting things. Now, everybody is talking about this and that, right? But you have been doing that for a while now. So how do you actually implement new trends, and how you're making sure that you're always staying ahead of the curve?
Well, that's such a great question. And I'm sort of allergic to the word trends because we would like to consider ourselves, and we are trailblazers, if you will. And perhaps as a result, we set trends. But the last thing that we want to be doing is to follow trends from other companies, because trends can come and go. And just because something is trendy doesn't mean that it's the right thing scientifically. So we like to really rely on the science and the facts, and what is really important behind that there are certain things that are right or wrong for the skin, and trends don't always necessarily account for that. So we see ourselves more as trailblazers, and then eventually trends may come from many of the things that we started doing, such as sampling or water-free. Another big one is we were always talking about a curated, streamlined collection. That's why we only have 10 products, because I didn't want to make products just to make a new product because it's September, or something, because a store wanted something new. I make a product when I feel that, at least in our line, we don't yet offer it, or it's something where I see white space in the industry. And to give you an example with our serum, which is what you had tested, one of the reasons we were able to get those really significant results is that we use a synergy of different ingredients. So we don't just have a vitamin C serum and a niacinamide serum and, this and that. And so we combine ingredients where, for example, if you talk about brightening of the skin, vitamin C, niacinamide, and CoQ10 working together synergistically actually will give you better results than any one of them alone would. And so if you have a company that has a history and understanding of ingredients in these ways, or has done that research, then we can understand that having one serum with several helpful ingredients working in synergy in a way that there's a transport mechanism that works properly, and they're not getting occluded on the surface of the skin by having, mineral oils or ingredients like that, that then you can do more with less. So our whole concept is really something that didn't work with the idea that was very popular like 2 years ago, having 14 steps, for example, 12 to 14 steps in your routine. So that was the trend at the time, and on TikTok and everywhere, but we didn't change what we know and what we do in order to follow the trend. We just said, no, this is, what we believe. And if that works for people, that's great. Some people may very much like that. But our experience, and again, I'm not saying that that doesn't work for people, but our experience is, as I mentioned, that when you have a product that has more ingredients that work in concert with one another harmoniously to imitate the properties of the skin where they're recognized, for example, like the squalane that can be absorbed because the skin recognizes it because it's so similar to human sebum, we can get better results that way. Again, how do we know? By clinical testing. So these are areas where now people are pulling back and saying, oh my goodness, no, too many steps seem to be causing irritation or skin allergies. And it makes sense because you're doubling up on preservatives and a lot of other ingredients. For example, people may not realize that several of the products that they're using have vitamin C. Maybe different kinds, different percentages, and you're layering all that one on top of another, where really to get that one dose of what you need would be more effective, but also less potentially irritating to having all of that put on the skin at once. So this is just a way where now it's a trend to have a multi-purpose product and to streamline. And it also saves money in the long run, and it saves time. But this is what we've been doing all along.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really like that. I sometimes have the feeling that the whole industry is like fashion, right? And just jumping from one thing to another, then this is out, then the next thing is in. But if you are looking, also if you're talking to dermatologists, right, they always recommend like the same products, regardless if it's the year, 2024, or it was 2010, or it was the year 2000, or the 1980s, right? And yeah, I really like that you're staying true to yourselves and to what you believe in. I think that is the way forward, and that is what transparency and ethical behavior, I feel, is all about.
Exactly. I think the consumer knows as well, if you're jumping from one thing to the next, or this product's coming out just because it's trending. I think that's something that, we hear from our consumers is really that for the past 10 years, we have been espousing these same beliefs. And so I think that's something that's also important to the consumer as well.
Yeah, having that consistency. And you want to feel the customer feels secure and confident that you are trustworthy in what you say. And nowadays, of course, people can go online, or you can go to a dermatologist to confirm that information. Or, that's where we like to also help to point people to resources where they can learn it for themselves, not necessarily listen to us about it. But you're so right in what you say. And I always liken it to bell bottoms. I was a 70s girl. I was in high school, and bell bottoms were so big back then. And then it got to straight leg. And if you even wore bell bottoms, oh my gosh, you were so uncool, you know. And then of course, bell bottoms came back in. And then my kids couldn't believe that I had bell bottoms because I saved all my, you know, clothes from them. So those are fashion things that I would consider trends that come in and out, and they don't necessarily harm anyone. But in the industry, there are really certain precepts that are just the way they are. They're factual. And so those are what we try to hew to. And even if it's a less popular position at that moment, we don't want to go with the wind.
That's fantastic. And I think this is a great stopping point where we can go to the audience Q&A. And as they type in their questions, again, you can use the Zoom Q&A box. You know, I just want to thank both of you for joining us. I thought that this was amazing, and I learned so much from you. And if people want to reach out to you, how can they find you, and where can they find you, and what is your address if they want to, you know, check out Retrouvé?
Absolutely.
Let me just say, we love that, first of all. My daughter, personally, Hannah, answers all of the DMs that we get.
On, yes, social media. So you can find us on Instagram at Retrouvé Skin. If you write in, I will be the one responding to you. So I would love to speak with you and answer any questions you may have. Also on our website, retrouvé.com, you can contact us through there, as well as our concierge service. We do offer also a personalized complimentary consultation as well. So even if you just have general skincare questions, we're more than happy to speak with you about them. Again, we want
nothing to do with our products. It's not about selling and pushing things on people. We know that the more education and understanding there is, probably the more that person will end up gravitating toward Retrouvé or a similar, you know, company. But additional to that, we encourage people to try samples, try before you buy, make sure it's right for you, understand how to use the product. So that's something else that we do. And I respond personally also to emails that are sent to me, which, you know, we love to do. It's an honor. We're here for the customer. And I miss the days in Kiels where we only had our flagship store, and my father, my grandfather, myself, and my older young daughter, when she was young, we were in the store every day, practically behind the counter, speaking with customers and interfacing. And that was my favorite way to do business. Nowadays, it's, you know, not possible, and so much is DTC and through computer, but as much as possible, we want to recreate that experience.
Fantastic. And then a first question, what is it that you would wish other skincare brands would do differently?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Well, just going back to the trends, I first want to say something positive. Sometimes there can be a very positive trend, and I don't like to really call it a trend, but this is something that we were involved in back in the Kiels days as well, and that is sustainability, for example. And I think that it's wonderful that most all companies are on a journey to be more sustainable, have more sustainable packaging, and you know, ethically sourced ingredients and all of that. So if one wants to call it, you know, a trend, I think that's a really positive one. So I love that so many companies are in there and trying to do that and trying to be better at that as we are ourselves as well, and to lower our carbon footprint. But I would really like to see what I recommended earlier, more companies doing clinical testing to validate and verify their products and their results. As a result, then maybe there would be less hyperbole and people not adhering to the regulations of what we're allowed to say and not say, and especially only say what we can prove.
Absolutely.
I
And
like that.
safety testing as well.
Yes.
Really all that's required safety-wise is an RIPT test. And so really having more safety testing, toxic, you know, evaluations, things like that in use studies, I think is really important as well.
Yeah,
Well,
I
think
like
a lot of companies do that too, but as a separate thing, I just want to say, in terms of testing and validation, we personally do toxicology studies. There's in use, there's chromogenicity, there's, you know, a lot of things that are available to companies nowadays. And so we personally like to do that. But I think getting validated results through consumer perception also, but most of all through, the clinical trials, is something that really can help the consumer to really see what they might be getting and make better decisions about what product might be worth a certain amount of money, for example.
And also in terms of, consumers making better decisions, you mentioned greenwashing earlier. And what do you think can the industry do against it so that, we are not seeing as much greenwashing as we see right now?
Well, again, I think leveling the playing field, we should have certain defined standards that we are all compared one another to or held accountable to. So there should be a definition, let's say, what is clean, what is green, or really explaining how a company is doing that rather than just saying we're a clean line, for example. So we do some things that, every company has different values. For us, sustainability, all of that is very important. The environment, I've been working in environmental causes, my family, for decades, and particularly World Water Day is coming tomorrow. I was on the board of Waterkeeper for years and years to help provide and protect our clean water sources, and Riverkeeper, Heal the Bay, a lot of, Oceana, wonderful environmental groups. And I love to see when companies are involved in that. And this is something that we could perhaps join together in doing, like we're a part of the Plastic Coalition, for example. So where you try to offset your plastic use. There's PACT, there are a lot of Green Dot organizations that we are involved in, and other ones as well, that we could all join together and unite as an industry to do together and make certain standards, if you will, so that consumers would understand, who or what is really green, how green is it, what is, sustainability in each different company, what is the definition of clean, because otherwise these terms can be manipulated, just as the claimed results for a product and the product claims can be manipulated as well if you're not proving them.
And in that same, kind of realm, do you think that the term clean should be regulated?
I do. I mean, that's kind of what I'm saying, is that if we have certain tests so that customers could see what exactly is what. It's difficult though, because there are differences of opinions even among scientists on what ingredients are okay to use or not okay to use. So, and what concentrations and things like that. So I understand that it's a complicated ask, but I think, again, the more that we can have standards so that the customer can compare products accurately, then the better that might be. We don't claim to be clean and, the most clean or whatever, because those definitions change from company to company. What we do is we say, this is how we define clean. And these are the ingredients that we use or don't use, or why, or this is our sustainability commitment. For example, at Retrouvé, for every product sold, we plant a tree through One Tree Planted. And we've now done almost 15,000 trees around the world. And so, that's a way that we can, outside of what's in the product or not in the product, contribute to sustainability and greening, if you will. But I think that there are still so many different definitions that each company can use or say that it's confusing for the consumer. So the more we can not have things be confusing and we're all on same Boden, all on the same ground, I think that's better. And most of that comes through testing and regulations. And with MOCRA and the new laws coming into effect, they, I think, are in some ways helpful to force everyone to have more of an even playing field in that way. And the FTC also cracking down now on, what one can and cannot say in terms of advertising.
That's fantastic.
They said it before, but it wasn't really, supported through their actions.
Yeah, I think, we are still early in the process with both of them, right? But we are seeing more and more warning letters and also fines. So um, that's really really good to see, because I do feel what you say with a level playing field, right? Oftentimes, companies, they just make claims for, especially we're seeing it a lot in acne, for example. And because acne, if you treat acne, it's a drug, it's not a cosmetic. But I feel that a lot of brands just don't know what the difference is, right? What
Exactly.
you mentioned earlier. So
Great
why
point.
should the consumer know what the difference is, right? And they are just making claims. And I also sometimes feel that, companies, they are just ready to fight, right? And they are just making these claims, and are ready, to get into a legal battle as long as they can sell a couple more products.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And that favors the larger companies as well,
Yeah.
because they have budgets for that. We're a smaller company, a family-owned company. And so, we're more risk averse, if you will. We don't want to take those chances and have to have those sorts of legal battles over it. So that's why we try to hew to the regulations, and we don't say some things. I remember back in the Kiehl's days when I was behind the counter, people would come to me and say, I want a cream that removes all my wrinkles. And I would say, there is no such thing. I'm sorry, we don't have that, but it also doesn't exist. Yes, it does. This company and that company have it. Why don't you make one? And they would even, be angry and arguing the point. And I'm trying to, if indeed that even existed, which at the time we didn't know about retin-A and some of the things that are really the only proven ingredients, prescription vitamin A, that we can say removes wrinkles, right? Then it would be a drug, though. So that's part of what we were talking about with standards and educating the consumer. And I think so much of that already has been done just because consumers are really more interested in protecting themselves. You talk about also with the different testing you do with wellness and nutrition and in every way, because how we look and feel isn't just about what cream we buy. It's sleep and nutrition and supplements and so many different things, that a sunscreen, that all together can help us be healthier or be our best selves, our healthiest selves, age gracefully for as long as possible.
Absolutely. And then one person, and we talked about this already, with your different tests, right? You do consumer testing, but you also do clinical trials, you test on instruments, and one person is interested to see what kind of study design you used. Did you test this against competitors or placebo, or is it all like one single group?
The testing, first of all, I would just like to say, I would like to do every testing possible. So I'm a big believer in that. And we just honestly don't have the budget for all of that testing. So that's why what's important is to have the kind of testing where they can do the same test, because even a subjective panel isn't necessarily the same. The questions asked and the way that it's handled isn't necessarily the same from one to another, from one lab to another, from one study to another. So when you do the testing, as you mentioned, that is actually the scientific assay, and you use these different machines and things like that to measure the skin. You are basically testing one against another. So that's what we look to do that. We don't have, there's anecdotal testing as well, but just to really get validation, we utilize our own product and see how it's tested. And there are, the basic 20, 50, 100 things that we can test for. And we hope that other companies will do the same. And then we all share those results. And that's how we can tell one from another.
Yeah, I think like the instrument testing that you do, is fantastic. It really gives you objective data, and you will definitely not see, results in the 100% or 90%. As you mentioned, Jamie, something in the 10, 20, 30 is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
then,
And you see too,
yeah,
we
go
have
ahead.
results from the clinical testing that we've done. You can see also immediately what has happened to the skin. So we've done testing where right after application, immediately, then using the machines to test the change in the skin. 2 weeks and 4 weeks, you can go even longer. So you can really see the progression of the changes in the skin as well with these machines, which I think is so helpful because then you have the data from each point in time and you can really,
And-
understand the product journey that way.
Right. And with the instrument testing, there are protocols. So everyone, I mean, theoretically, one lab could do it differently from another, but generally there are protocols of what has to be done in order to perform a certain test. So even if it's done in a different lab or whatever, it should be much more of a similar test under similar circumstances with similar instrumentation. And so as a result, I think that's what gives us the cleanest measure now, at least one product to another in terms of efficacy. But
And as
ideally, yeah, I'd love to take our product into a lab with this line or that line, or, it's just, it's expensive. And by the time you do all the different, I haven't done all the testing that I would like even on our 10 products, because there's so many great tests out there, whether it's for safety, for efficacy, for validation, for assay. How about, this is something that we're really big on. It's one thing to put in 20% vitamin C, right? How much do you actually get out after the product's been heated or gone through the manufacturing process and all of that, right? So that's what interests me. And that's what we're also working on to share ourselves. Because of our airless system, we know that we get more longevity of the potency of ingredients. But a lot of companies, I always wonder, they'll have a cream for $450, let's say, and it's in a jar. And they say, oh, it's so strong, it's so great, that's why it's $450. So let's say we believe that this is such an amazing cream. Well, then why would you put it in a jar where every time you open it, there's light and air that comes in, or you dip your fingers or something in that introduces bacteria, and you have to have more preservative to counteract that. And preservative can also kill the good things as well as the things that you want it to kill, right? So that's why, let's see, maybe that is the most, a really terrific formulation, but let's see after 3 weeks of use and opening the jar all the time, how much potency is there in the effective ingredients. So that's another assay that, again, there are protocols for. So, there's USP, like you can't just kind of say, oh, well, we have this much. There are tests that have to be done in order to find out exactly how much vitamin C is in there a month later or whatever. So that would be another way to compare apples to apples, so that we're all on an equal footing and not just saying things.
That's correct, yeah. And then also, again, going back to clinical testing. So you mentioned instruments, right? Which are unfortunately a little bit more on the expensive side. But then you also have, another way of objective data measurement, for example, is through expert skin grading, where board certified dermatologists are looking at, the skin of a subject at baseline, and then after a couple of weeks, midline typically, and at end line. And that, obviously really helps also with objective data measurement, but it's a little bit more cost efficient compared to instruments, for example. Fantastic.
Absolutely. We're for all different, kinds of testing. And the panel testing is great too. And we tend to,
Which we've done as well.
do more of that because it is less expensive. And it's easier to do, but you get very valid information from that as well. I'm not at all diminishing that. I'm just saying that the most objective would be, the instrumentation with the
Absolutely.
even with a dermatologist, we're subjective, we're just human. So one dermatologist may see something differently from another. It also depends on the skin, that if you are from another country where skin, tends to be more oily in general and what you're used to seeing, for example. So, there's a certain degree of subjectivity, but that's certainly an excellent test. And that's what in-use studies are too. You know, the dermatologist goes and evaluates whether they see any irritation or what every single day over 4 weeks, let's say. So there are excellent dermatological studies. I completely agree. The more, the better. And I love that companies such as yours offer this great menu of different things. So for me, it's kind of like, I want to do, you know, what's going to validate the product and what we can afford. But it's so exciting to be able to do those and have those options.
Fantastic. Well, I think, I think it's 11 a.m. in Pacific time. So I think, we are ready to wrap things up, unfortunately. Jamie and Hannah, thank you again so much, for your time. It was really, really great to have you on the webinar. I learned so much. I hope the audience learned a ton from you guys as well. And, just a matter of what's happening next. Our next webinar is actually on April 25th on pet health, something entirely different. So if you are interested in the pet health market, or want to enter the pet health market, or already part of it, you should not miss this webinar, and you can just scan the QR code. And
by the way, we're big
register.
pet people, so I'm interested.
Amazing.
Even though
That's
it's not my
fantastic.
business, just how can I take the best care of our furry friends and family members? So thank you. It sounds fascinating. Thank you again for having us. And it's been such a pleasure to get to work with your company, and that we, understand the common approach and philosophy about the importance of these things. And we look forward to more. But thank you for having us.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was fantastic. And Hannah, I'm also an equestrian, so we should talk about that.
Yes, we should. We'll have to connect. I love it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both. And I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You
Thank
too.
you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.